Hello, everybody. This is Nanette Kennedy with Humanities Team and the Evolution Revolution, and we are reading Conversations with God, Book 3 by Neale Donald Walsch, and we are on Chapter 13, and because we all have different, versions, I can't really tell you what page that is on. But we're on Chapter 13, and Linda, I was thinking of maybe reading the last paragraph of chapter 12 because chapter 13 refers back to that paragraph.
Okay. So you just want the very last paragraph as opposed to the last answer.
Why don't you go ahead and do the last where it says this is the divine dichotomy?
Okay,
Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So picking up, this is the end of chapter 12, the last part of that conversation. This is Neale speaking. This is the divine dichotomy again. Everything is singular, yet everything is one. Exactly. Each finger on your hand is different, yet it is all the same hand. The air in your house is the air that is everywhere, yet the air from room to room is not the same, but feels markedly different. It's the same with people. All people are one, yet no two people are alike. You could not, therefore, love two people in the same way, even if you tried, and you would never want to, because love is a unique response to that which is unique. So when you demonstrate your love for one person, you are doing so in a way which you cannot do so with another. Your thoughts, words, and actions, your responses, are literally impossible to duplicate. They're one of a kind, just as is the person for whom you have these feelings. If the time has come when you have desired this special demonstration with one person alone, then choose it, as you say. Announce it and declare it. Make your declaration and announcement moment to moment of your freedom, not your ongoing obligation. For true love is always free, and obligation cannot exist in the space of love. If you see your decision to express your love in a particular way, with only one particular other, as a sacred promise, never to be broken, the day may come when you will experience that promise as an obligation, and you will resent it. Yet if you see this decision not as a promise made only once, but as a free choice made over and over, that day of resentment will never come. Remember this. There is only one sacred promise, and that is to tell and live your truth. All other promises are fortunes of freedom, and that can never be sacred. For freedom is who you are. If you forfeit freedom, you forfeit yourself. And that is not a sacrament. That is a blasphemy.
Do you want to go on with 13, Linda?
Oh, I see. I had I muted myself to cough. I unmuted myself, and then it muted me again. So, all right.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Chapter 13. Phew, those are tough words. Are you saying we should never make promises? That we should never promise anything to anyone? Well, as most of you are now living your life, there is a lie built into every promise. The lie is that you can know now how you will feel about a thing and what you will want to do about that thing on any given tomorrow. You cannot know this if you are living your life as a reactive being, which most of you are. Only if you are living life as a creative being can your promise not contain a lie. Creative beings can know how they're going to feel about a thing at any given time in the future because creative beings create their feelings rather than experiencing them. Until you can create your future, you cannot predict your future. Until you can predict your future, you cannot promise anything truthfully about it. Yet even one who both creates and predicts her future has the authority and the right to change. Change is a fundamental right of all creatures. Indeed, it is more than a right, for a right is that which is given. Change is that which is. Change is. That which is change, you are. You cannot be given this. You are this. Now, since you are change, and since change is the only thing constant about you, you cannot truly promise to always be the same. Do you mean that there are no constraints in the universe or no constants in the universe? Are you saying that there is nothing which remains constant in all of creativity? Well, the process you call life is a process of recreation. All of life is constantly recreating itself anew in each moment of the now. In this process, identicality is impossible, since if a thing is identical, it has not changed at all. Yet while identicality is impossible, similarity is not. Similarity is the result of the process of change, producing a remarkably similar version of what went before. When creativity reaches a high level of similarity, you call it identicality. And from this gross perspective of your limited viewpoint, it is. Therefore, in human terms, there appears to be great constancy in the universe. That is, things seem to look alike and act alike and react alike. You see consistency here. This is good, for it provides a framework within which you may consider and experience your existence in the physical. Yet I tell you this, viewed from the perspective of all life, that which is physical and that which is non-physical, the appearance of constancy disappears. Things are experienced as they really are, constantly changing. You're saying that sometimes the changes are so delicate, so subtle, that from our less discerning viewpoint, they appear the same, sometimes exactly the same, when in fact they are not? Precisely. There are no such things as identical twins? Exactly. You have captured it perfectly. Yet we can recreate ourselves anew in a form sufficiently similar to produce the effect of constancy? Yes. And we do this in human relationships in terms of who we are and how we behave. Yes, although most of you find this very difficult. Because true constancy, as opposed to the appearance of constancy, violates the natural law, as we have just learned, and it takes a great master to even create the appearance of identicality. A master overcomes every natural tendency. Remember, the natural tendency is toward change, to show up as identicality. In truth, he cannot show up identically from moment to moment, but he can show up as sufficiently similar to create the appearance of being identical. Yet people who are not masters show up identically all the time. I know people whose behaviors and appearances are so predictable you can stake your life on them. Yes, it takes great effort to do this intentionally. The master is one who creates a high level of similarity, what you call consistency, intentionally. A student is one who creates consistency without necessarily intending to. A person who always reacts the same way to certain circumstances, for instance, will often say, "I couldn't help it." A master would never say that. Even if a person's reaction produces an admirable behavior, something for which they receive praise, their response will often be, "Well, it was nothing. It was automatic, really. Anybody would do it." A master would never do that either. A master, therefore, is a person who quite literally knows what he is doing. She also knows why. People not operating at levels of mastery often know neither. This is why it is so difficult to keep promises? It's one reason. As I said, until you can predict your future, you cannot promise anything truthfully. A second reason people find it difficult to keep promises is that they come into conflict with authenticity. What do you mean? I mean, their evolving truth about a thing differs from what they said their truth would always be. And so they are deeply conflicted. What to obey, my truth or my promise? Advice? I have given you this advice before. Betrayal of yourself in order not to betray another is betrayal nonetheless. It is the highest betrayal. But this would lead to promises being broken all over the place. Nobody's word on anything would matter. Nobody would be counted on for anything. Oh, so you've been counting on others to keep their word, have you? No wonder you've been so miserable. Oh, who says I've been miserable? You mean this is the way you look and act when you've been happy? All right, okay, so I've been miserable sometimes. Oh, a great deal of the time. Even when you've had every reason to be happy, you've allowed yourself to be miserable, worrying about whether you'll be able to hold on to your happiness. And the reason you've even had to worry about this is that holding on to your happiness has depended to a large degree on other people keeping their word. You mean I don't have a right to expect or at least hope that other people will keep their word? Well, why would you want such a right? The only reason another person would not keep their word to you would be because they didn't want to, or they felt they couldn't, which is the same thing. And if a person did not want to keep his word to you, or for some reason felt he couldn't, why on earth would you want him to? Do you really want someone to keep an agreement she does not want to keep? Do you really feel people should be forced to do things they don't feel they can do? Why would you want to force anyone at all to do anything against his will? Well, try this for a reason. Because to let them get away with not doing what they said they were going to do would hurt me or my family. So in order to avoid injury, you're willing to inflict injury. I don't see how it injures another simply to ask him to keep his word. Yet he must see it as injurious, or he would keep it willingly. So I should suffer the injury, or watch my children and family suffer the injury, rather than injure the one who made the promise simply by asking that it be kept? Do you really think that if you force another person to keep a promise, that you will have escaped injury? I tell you this, more damage has been done to others by persons leading lives of quiet desperation, that is, doing what they felt they had to do, than ever was done by persons freely doing what they wanted to do. When you give a person freedom, you remove danger, you don't increase it. Yes, letting someone off the hook on a promise or commitment made to you may look like it will hurt you in the short run, but it will never damage you in the long run, because when you give the other person their freedom, you give yourself freedom as well. And so now you are free of the agonies and the sorrows, the attacks on your dignity and your self-worth that inevitably follow when you force another person to keep a promise to you that he or she does not want to keep. The longer damage will far outweigh the shorter, as nearly everyone who has tried to hold another person to their word has discovered. But does this same idea hold true in business as well? How could the world do business that way? Actually, it's the only sane way to do business. The problem right now in your whole society is that it's based on force, legal force, which you call the force of law, and too often physical force, which you call the world's armed forces. You have not yet learned to use the art of persuasion. If not by legal force, the force of law through the courts, how would we persuade businesses to meet the terms of their contract and keep their agreements? Given your current cultural ethic, there may not be another way. Yet with a change in cultural ethic, the way you are now seeking to keep businesses, and individuals for that matter, from breaking their agreements will appear very primitive. Can you explain? You are now using force to make sure agreements are kept. When your cultural ethic is changed to include understanding that you are all one, you would never use force, because that would only damage yourself. You would not slap your left hand with your right, even if the left hand is strangling you. But that is another thing which would not happen. You would stop strangling yourself. You would stop biting your nose to spite your face. You would stop breaking your agreements. And of course, your agreements themselves would be much different. You would not agree to give something of value, which you have, to another, only if they have something of value to give you in exchange. You would never hold back on giving or sharing something until you got what you call a just return. You would give and share automatically, and so there would be far fewer contracts to break, because a contract is about the exchange of goods and services, whereas your life would be about the giving of goods and services, regardless of what exchange may or may not take place. Yet, in this kind of one-way giving would be your salvation found, for you would have discovered what God has experienced, that you give to another, you give to yourself. What goes around comes around.
Let's pause there, Linda,
Okay.
because I think this, I've got a lot of questions, and I don't have the answers about this whole identicality thing. And a master would know and would never say that. And this. Does anybody want to speak to that?
I think it refers to like, as he said repeatedly many times in his books, that we're a very young species. So I think it relates to our immaturity, our lack of awareness of our true power.
And at the very beginning, excuse me, of chapter 13, not the very beginning, but near the beginning, it says, creative beings can know how they are going to feel about a thing at any time in the future, because creative beings create their feelings rather than experiencing them. I don't follow that either.
I think that, again, it relates, for me personally, it relates to how easily we're conditioned. Our innocence is conditioned to believe that we're victims, or that, yeah, I think it relates to conditioning. Over.
Well, can you hear me?
Yep.
It really is, to me, to my way of thinking, it's the key to what living in the moment means. In any given moment, we always have the choice of response. How are we going to respond? And for the most part, as a species, we don't operate using that ability to choose. We do our standard reaction, which is either fight, flight, or freeze, usually. So I think that that's what it's talking about, is this notion that when something happens, we have a kind of an automatic response. But if we're truly living in the moment as our God being, we have the ability to choose what we want to have our response be. And quite often, when you're in that moment of choice, it's totally different than what your automatic wired response is. Over.
And to me, it's about intention too. It's about, I'm a counsellor, and if I go into a particular counselling session and I've made an intention to manifest in a certain way beforehand, I just don't go into it automatically. Like, how am I going to react to the person? I make an intention beforehand.
I agree with that, Sarah. Quality of intention is a very important aspect of creation.
I am feeling like I understand it a little bit more.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Nanette. It's
Yes.
Mike Gregory here.
Oh,
everyone. How you doing?
welcome back.
Hi, Mike. Nice to hear your voice.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, yeah, nice to be here. Hey, everyone. And happy birthday, Nanette.
Thank you.
Just a quick. Did it say something when you reread that back as a creative being has the ability to know? Is it possible to just read that back very quickly? That bit that you read, Nanette.
Yes. Creative beings can know how they are going to feel about a thing at any time in the future, because creative beings create their feelings rather than experiencing them.
Yeah. So for me, that is a creative being is someone who's fully connected to God. And in that moment, when you are fully connected, since there is no past and future, it's like a flash visualization, if you like. You know, people who just set, like, even in like a near-death experience or something, they said they saw everything and they knew everything all in that moment. And I think I may have had one or two experiences like this in my life where it's just like a knowing, like a hyper visualization of almost like an inspired thought when you have it in that moment and you've just visualized it all completely, to know every part of the DVD disc that book 3 talks about, you know, how everything's already occurred on that DVD disc. We all remember that bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think that's saying, which is really powerful. But again, it, I think, talks to having to be a creative being all the time, and the moment the mind comes in and thinks something or thinks a non-God thought, if that makes sense, anything that is like an ego separation type thought, then it's you kind of lose that connection to God, and like based on fear, and that when those types of thoughts come in. But staying as a creative being, I think, is remaining in our true God self, and only in those moments can we know how we're going to feel about something in the future, because I guess the future doesn't exist in the context that we're talking about it. At least I don't think I really worded that exactly how I wanted to, how I thought about it, but I hope it kind of makes sense.
It does, and interestingly, it reminds me about something we talked about in the last couple of weeks. And you kind of pulled the dots together for me, so that if you are somebody who plays a musical instrument and you're doing really well playing that instrument until you come out of that moment or the zone and say to yourself, wow, I'm doing really good. And then you start messing up. I have the same way with typing. I am a really, 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 really very fast typer. But as soon as I start thinking about, wow, I am just whistling through this, I start making all sorts of mistakes. So I don't know if that analogy helps or hinders what you were trying to say.
Definitely, because I think you've become the typing, and the moment you start thinking I'm great at typing, then you know there's you, and then there's the typing, then there's separation. But it's like when I'm driving, or another example is I was playing table tennis or ping pong with my sister's boyfriend yesterday, and I was playing really well, and then the moment I started to think, wow, I'm playing excellently, I started to mess up. And I said to him, the key is, you know, to become the game. I need to become the ball and become the game, rather than thinking I'm playing the game. So, yeah,
Yep.
It definitely makes sense.
Well, okay, so now I feel like I'm not in the basement here, as it were, because I think I was just overthinking the whole thing, and that's part of the problem, is the overthinking, because the I comes back into it.
Yep.
But thank you. And it's so funny that you're here today, because I was thinking about you yesterday.
Oh, wow. Well, there you go.
There you go.
Go.
Let's see here. Or I have a couple of other. Let's see. And I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't thinking that for the most part it was so difficult for people to keep promises. But where he goes with it, you know, with the betrayal of yourself in order to not betray another is betrayal nonetheless. It's the highest betrayal. And then Neil says, but this would lead to promises being broken all over the place. Nobody's word on anything would matter. Nobody could be counted on for anything. And then God says, oh, so you've been counting on others to keep their word, have you? No wonder you've been so miserable. Anybody want to go there?
Well, it's a very obvious one, but I made a new friend up here in Scotland, and last week she her card didn't work in the wall, and she had to pay for a petrol within 24 hours, or they would call the police. She already bought petrol, and the card wouldn't work. So I said I would lend her some money, and I lent her £50 because she hadn't got any money for a few days, and then the money didn't come back, and then she started making a whole load of excuses, and I kept thinking, how am I going to play this? I really need this money back. And it got to the end of the week, and I kind of knew this Neil stuff. I knew I had to just let it happen, and I had to trust her. But I couldn't keep going. I had to sort of push her. I was on the kind of, is it going to trust her or not? So I said, I really could do with that money by Monday. And then I spoilt it all by then. She did give it back, but I felt I should have gone completely, like, not make her keep her promise, not force her. I really regretted it afterwards.
That's a strange position to be in. I hope you didn't beat yourself up too much, because I think most people would have reacted the same way.
I did beat myself up because she came around with some beautiful chocolates and said, I'm so sorry it took me so long, and here's the money, and here's the chocolate. And
You really great.
I couldn't say I didn't really trust you.
Yeah. Well, and you know what else it brings to mind, because I think we've all been in positions like you just mentioned, Sarah. But it also brings to mind, as my children were growing up, and with my grandchild, I am very careful to not make promises, because it sets up an expectation, and kids don't forget those kind of things. They know that you said, even if I said I will take you to the park later, and I didn't didn't promise, but something happened during the day where it turned out we couldn't go to the park, they'll let you know that you said we were going to the park. So I've also been very careful about planning things later in the day, because I don't know what's going to happen in between that moment and the moment that I told, my granddaughter we'd go to the park. So it kind of begs the question, should we be making promises at all? And it also...
I remember a phrase.
Go ahead.
No, I just was going to say, I remember a phrase or a saying, don't make promises you can't keep.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where I heard that, but...
Yep, I think I've definitely heard it. I don't know where it came from either. Unless you've got your car keys in your hand and say, I promise we're leaving right this minute, and you do, then your promises, I guess it's in context too.
I think it's important to promise to love yourself repeatedly throughout the day, and offer yourself compassion completely throughout the day. And like for your part, Sarah, like, we're human beings, and, as human beings, we make mistakes, and we have to have compassion for our mistakes, and not beat ourselves up for our mistakes. We've been conditioned to beat ourselves up way more than we've been conditioned to accept ourselves for exactly how we are in any given moment.
I was going to broaden this promise thing. Because those of us that are married, we are promising our spouse that we're going to be married for the rest of our lives. And I have experience in not remaining with, I've been married a couple times. And when I think about that, if somebody doesn't want to be with you any longer for whatever reason, why would we want to still be with that person? You know, based on the fact that a promise was made. And if that promise was made and it is not healthy, there was a movie in the 70s that the marriage vow said, and I promise to love, honor, and cherish you so long as I still like you. So it just makes the word promise very loaded. And even when promising to ourselves, I could beat myself up for promising myself that I was going to be doing my very best today, and then something happens and I'm like, bad word, because I didn't do my best. But with what Christine said, you've got to make sure you're being compassionate with yourself.
That's the most important thing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Michael. It's wonderful to have you on the call.
Oh, thanks, Christine. You probably won't want me to go ahead because there's kind of a disagreement with you there, just a little bit. In that I'm not sure, it's not 100% disagreement. I'm just asking the question in that, do we have to even make the promise to ourselves that we're going to be compassionate to ourselves and we're going to do this to ourselves? Because it's almost then if you don't, then it's like, letting yourself down. I mean, I really don't know. So it's not a disagreement. It is asking the question. I'm on my path very much at the moment in asking these types of questions. I'm finding what I'm doing at the moment, and again, I don't know how effective it is but almost just asking God, please help me to, be compassionate towards myself and help me love myself. But to say that, I have to do something is almost, I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there and get your take on that.
I don't think we have to do anything. I think it's important that we, recognize how we've been conditioned and to be compassionate to the innocents that believe so many things that just simply are not true.
One of the things, Michael, that you just said that really resonates with me is, don't forget we're not on our own here. If you stop and take a deep breath and say, God, I could really use your help with blah, 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 whatever it is you're wanting help with, that seems kinder to the self than necessarily promising yourself, because we've taken God kind of out of the equation when we do that.
Yeah. Can be tough, this whole spirituality stuff, right?
Yep. Well, and it's Christine. I love what Christine says a lot when she'll say, I don't understand that either, but maybe we're not supposed to yet, and
Sure. I mean, I have come to the understanding over and over again, really, for me, and it's really, I think it's the age-old thing of like where humanity is at the moment, like whether do we embrace God or do we deny God? And I find that, as a universal kind of thing, but also very much a prominent thing in my day-to-day life at the moment is now that, I even intellectually know now almost that, I've been on this, looking at reading CWG almost 3 years now, or looking at that type of material, and I had my, awakening, to sound like a cliche, but it is still that constant, accepting of God consciousness and then denying that God consciousness and just jumping between the two. And I've come to realize that self-love is literally, I don't know, definitely up there, if not maybe at the top of the list of things I should be doing. I don't know if these are the right best words I could be using, but honoring my mind, honoring my body, and just truly, I guess those two things come from really loving myself, and and loving myself is an inadvertent act of loving everyone else, because I know that I'm at my best with other people when I do have a, even if there's, 1 ounce in a 12-ounce glass of love, even that is so much more powerful than, less than that. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I find it to be real, and I know, Christine, you talk about that all the time, always being compassionate with yourself, honoring the self, but gee, I mean, it can be. I think it's one of the biggest challenges, and I do think a sort of a pacing has to be implemented, at least in my own life, in it as well, rather than being disconnected from God for however long, and being probably not the most godlike being, and then just saying, okay, I'm going to just be, that's it. I'm going to meditate and I'm going to read, and I don't think there is any way to do it. I think this is trying to put some sort of theory on it, and acting as if the mind can work out what God's plan is. For me, it's just, I guess, connecting and following the intuition of God's inspirational thoughts that come through.
Well, a practice that I been learning is just to gently and kindly ask the mind to step aside and go into the heart space, and like the mind's been conditioned to be in charge for so long that it doesn't understand that when we live from the heart, that's so much more powerful than living from the mind. So I've been asking my mind when things come up, and like things come up all the time. Like I was programmed to hate myself, right? And I really believed for many years that I was a worthless piece of junk. But when I can be kind to the mind and yet be firm with the mind that, my heart really does want to lead, and it wants you to feel safe enough to come into the heart. I'm not there yet, but I still keep working on it. Over.
And do you engage in any other practices as well? Because as in, asking the mind, and I think that's a great thing. I really do think the subconscious mind is incredibly powerful and does listen when you put questions out there to it, and it's never out there to harm you, essentially. I guess all of this stuff is more of a protection mechanism. But yeah. One great teacher here, I absolutely love Ram Dass or Richard Alpert, and he talks about practices being like fender and body repair kit work on your vehicle, almost, to just have other practices that help your vehicle be strong, that when God's consciousness flows through, that your vehicle doesn't go out of control and just sort of crash. So, I mean, what do you engage in anything like chanting or breathing or mantra or yoga or anything like that you find is especially?
I do tapping, emotional freedom technique. I do restorative yoga. I'm a laughter yoga leader. I do whatever I can to, I like spontaneous transformation. There's so much out there right now that we can participate in. And I also meditate, and I meditate daily on my own, but I also meditate in groups. And and we do a lot of, here in Victoria, a lot of landscape zodiac work, and we also do Richard Rudd's Gene Keys, and we've been doing that for many years. And Richard Rudd, I think lives near Exeter in England, but anyway, the Gene Keys are a living transmission, and I find them just fascinating. And so those are other practices that I do, Michael.
Wow, see, and I think that's where I'm at the moment. I've been looking at all these other things, even to go away and do these kind of, I think, Theravada and Buddhism type things where you go and all these things. And I think for me, I mean, you sound further down the line, and you've been doing it longer than me, Christine. I think it's the old part of my mind that's holding me back, saying, are you sure? Because if you go down that road, it's just like the embracing of God. And it's almost like those horror movies where the demon's just trying to hold on to the body, like, no,
Mm-hmm.
but not so scary, not like that. But I'm just saying to exaggerate, between going to God and denying God. That's maybe I'm just exaggerating, being a bit overly dramatic about it all, but that's kind of, I think, it can be almost equated to that a little bit.
Well, I don't think I'm any further along than you, Michael. I think we're all in this together, and that there's something really profound happening right now, and it's so far beyond what a finite mind can understand. There's an infinite intelligence in the universe, and it's really, we're all in this together. What I like to say to myself is, I am one cell in a unified field of the most kind and loving presence I can imagine.
That's lovely.
And then I'm reminded, I'm not trying to take this to the opposite end of the spectrum, but was it yesterday that Amsterdam had somebody drove a car into a bunch of people, and you hear these things, and it made me think of I can't think of his name right now. Christine.
Our country coordinator, Renee?
Yes, thank you. Because he's been so frightened and so upset by things that are happening in Europe and the UK, and then when I heard that news yesterday, and it was in Amsterdam where he lives, I just thought, and from what you said, Christine, I'm one cell in this glorious being of however you said that, and the world's got problems, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that. It's how we face those problems. And at the beginning of the call, or the beginning of the discussion, Christine, you said something like, we're all human. I think it was in response to Sarah. And, we're all going to have feelings sometimes that are not completely in line. We could go probably get a pretty good neurotic thing going if we were like, every thought that goes through your mind, yes, no, that's not a good one. Yes, that's a good thought. No, that's a bad thought. We could drive ourselves insane. And I think as long as we are getting better at knowing when we have stepped off the path, like if you yell at one of your kids or something, as long as we're getting better at realizing, well, it's not feeling like I'm on my path right now, which I know for me in my journey, I am far better at knowing and not just being a reactionary individual. And then we also have to remember that there are these people that are doing things because of the way they see the world that the rest of us are seeing as craziness. They're part of this being that you're talking about, Christine. Over.
Yes, they absolutely are a part of it, and they're the part of it that believes that they're separate and apart, and there's such a thing as right or wrong, and yeah, they certainly are a part of us.
I just want to remind us that, back to the idea of people breaking promises, just to remember Don Miguel Ruiz's recommendation of not taking things personally. Because I think that that's what Neil's talking about, or God's talking about to Neil, is that when someone breaks their promise, it's all about the person breaking the promise, not the person whose promise has been broken too. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we are at the end of the hour unless somebody has a closing comment they want to make.
Well, it's so nice to be back in this group. I've missed it. We didn't have it. I think I was away, and then I think maybe it's been 3 weeks since I've been in the group. And anyway, I'm happy to be back.
And we're glad to have you back. Last week was a cancellation, and because that's the day my husband fell. And I was planning on meeting up with Linda in a place that's not too far from my house. But as it turned out, I wouldn't have been able to meet with her anyway.
There you go.
So
I was sorry to hear about that, but
yep.
I'm glad he's going to be okay.
Yep. Everybody's going to be okay. And that,
well, I trust he won't have to have surgery, or that if he does, that it'll be successful and he won't be in pain.
yeah, he'll find out tomorrow. So, all right, everybody. Until next week, I love you all. And
yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, Michael, it's so glad to hear your voice.
Yeah, it's really a treasure to have you here, Michael.
Oh, thanks. It's good to be here with you again as well.
Good.
Happy birthday, Nanette.
Thank you.
Bye, Nanette.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
Christine. Bye, Michael. Bye,
Bye, everyone.
Shabana.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good day.
Bye.